All right, I don't know what time it is on your clock, but I know what I'm getting ready for. It is time for the Professional CISO Podcast with David Malicoat.
Welcome, one and all, to the Professional CISO Show. I'm your host, David Malicoat. This show is an exploration of the topics necessary to transform the role of the CISO into one of a professional. All right, gang, we have an interview today with a security leader in the healthcare space, although he has not spent all his time in the healthcare space. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. His roots are in the military, in defense, consulting, home entertainment, power and electricity. Some notables about our guest today. I love these. These are, I'd honestly say, maybe I'll go out there a little bit and say probably some of the best ones we've had. So he's a native Texan from San Antonio. And as you know, he said he was in the military, so he was in the Air Force. And he didn't like the weather down there in San Antonio. He's sick of it. So he wanted to see cold and snow. What did he do? He wound up stationed in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where they received 350 inches of snow in his first year there. Be careful what you wish for. Beyond that, another notable, he was bucked off and kicked in the ribs when he was 12 by the horse that his dad gave him. Now, the curiosity there is, did he tell dad, or was it just yeah? But I think that's another, you wish for the horse, be careful what you wish for. Having my wife is a writer as well, so of course I've got to see some fun gymnastics out of her, with those type of things with horses. They can be unexpected. All right, but finally, please like, follow, share. It's the best way to make sure that you continue to get this great content. We've had great guests on, another one today. Hit that follow button on Spotify and Apple. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that little bell to make sure you get the alerts when we drop those new episodes. Follow us on LinkedIn, and if you really like us, follow. Tell a friend or neighbor. Let them know, hey, we got some good content out here, and keep listening. All right, so let's talk about being a professional CISO. Today's episode, our guest is Paul Reyes. He is currently the Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at AccentCare. He has held positions at U.S. Air Force, Raytheon, Blockbuster, like that one, and Vistra Corp, to name a few. There's some others in there as well. Please welcome Paul Reyes.
Thank you very much. It's excellent to be here. Been a long time. Been wanting to come on the show with you. So it's really cool to be in an industry where we now have our own podcast of looking at this industry. So,
love it. I appreciate you coming. I appreciate your support. Number one, we got to tell the story. This came about from a little bit of a hard time at one of the local conferences. Paul came in. He kind of messed up what he was saying. He's like, I'm sorry. I'm just not used to being around a famous person. And of course, I hadn't said a word at that point. So of course, Paul was giving me a hard time. So I'm like, all right, immediately, you're coming on the show. Let's go. No, we've got that kind of relationship, but I appreciate that, man. And it truly, I think, having voices like yours and the people that we've had on, everybody's got a story. Everybody can contribute. And I think this is just one of those pathways that we can make that happen.
Absolutely.
So, all right, so let's get started. Love the human side of the story, where Paul Reyes, young man, young boy, when did technology hit you? Talk me through that. Talk me through the arc into cyber, and then kind of into today. Give me that kind of 2-minute Paul Reyes arc.
Well, an hour into 2 minutes, sure. So early on, I knew I loved technology. I was constantly being brought in by my dad to go do hard work. He's a jack of all trades, did a whole bunch of stuff. And so I was the manual labor gopher for him because he was older. I was a oops kind of baby, and so he was older and I was doing everything. So I hated working with my hands, wanted to be in, just using my brain and stuff. And so I started getting into tech, started to really, probably half of them don't know what a VCR is and a beta, unit is.
Oh yeah.
But I started playing with stuff like that. When I went into school, that's all I started to kind of involve myself in, critical math, and started doing programming in there. And I started my time on a Zenith 150, and that's how I got into programming. And that was that first journey, getting into tech. I got in the military early, and while I was sitting in the military, they had a Zenith 150 out there. So I just started programming out there, doing my own thing. And I got noticed. And then they asked me to go write a program to kind of modulate up data onto a TV so they can get news for the thing. So I said, sure. It's like, that got noticed on that and pulled into Unix to start learning programming in that area, which triggered then into my IT area within the military, which then triggered when I left, got my job in Raytheon because it was an easy transition. And then I started running data centers. So it was just a progression that kind of got me into infrastructure and operations, just listening to the tea leaves of what's going on in my world. It wasn't until when I went to Vistra early on, it used to be Energy Future Holdings, and been there, done that. Been doing now infrastructure for 25 years.
Right.
I was about to leave to go do something different. The team was very qualified to go without me. My CIO said, hey, if you're looking for something different, why don't you jump into cyber? It's 2016 time period.
Yep.
And I was like, I hate cyber. And they crash everything. They answer of no, and they don't understand what the business is talking about. And I was like, he goes, well, that's the whole point. Why don't you try it?
Right.
And I was like, so let me pray about it. Let me think.
Yeah.
And I did. My wife said, you love a challenge. Why not? Give it a year. And so that's what I did. That's how I jumped in it. I was running infrastructure operations and cybersecurity at the same time. And when I dove into it, started getting certified, started talking to my teams, I loved it. It was the the uptick of when that started to come into the industry and started to really get into the news. I get it that it's been there for a while, but it was really starting to get popular and a lot of focus around that. So I grew with it at that time, and that's how I jumped into it. A year later, I was made a CISO. Got really big in our company. I divested off my infrastructure operations, focused on cyber risk and compliance.
Wow. That's an amazing story. I like that. We were probably about the same time frame because I had done the same thing and went into consulting and infrastructure and operations services. I delivered cybersecurity services, but had not necessarily just been solely focused on it. And 2016 time frame is when I did it as well. So yeah, and I agree. It was the right time. I think the demand was there for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Now that you've been in the seat a while, a couple different places, do you believe in the idea that we must professionalize our role? And if you do, what does that mean to you? 'Cause it means a lot of different things to a lot of different folks. This is my standard question, right? And if you don't, good to go too. What does that mean as well?
No, I'm totally into it. I do have my own opinion around what it means, but and it might not be popular. I don't know. We'll see.
That's what we're here for. We're here for the provocative conversations.
I do think that CISOs to become professional and championed by board and executive leadership is that you really need to think non-technical. You really need to understand what the business risk is. You need to understand value. You need to understand business impact. You need to understand what does the business care about and what is that risk tolerance. Right. You need to have that business acumen view to be able to become professional enough to be able to have a seat at the table. If you don't have that, and I'm not saying get rid of your technical, because you're the liaison between it, and we've started to have to bring in BISOs, business CISOs, if you will, to fill that gap, and we really don't. Our CISOs should be qualified to do that and interface with the business on a regular time period. And what I find is a lot of peers are still in the technical aspects. They want to, their metrics are, hey, the click rate and how many vulnerabilities they haven't patched, and it's like that flies right over the top of business people. It's like, I have no idea. Go do your job and don't worry about it, right?
Right.
And they really want to understand, what does that mean for risk? What does that mean for my company? Because if you give the right data to a business owner, they'll make decisions and they're willing to take risk. They just need to have the right data to make those risks with.
Would you say that we're a translator to some sort?
Yeah, that's a good point. A good translator or a partner, just how do you partner to be able to translate whatever, cyber is one thing, but it could be any other area, right? It could be Gen AI. Not everybody's going to understand what that means from a, natural language processing machine learning. Like, I don't know what that means. Oh, okay, well, here's what it means, right, for that business value.
Okay, so we're on the same page on that. Always like to give my guests their options of some of the things they're passionate about talking about. And I think, and now that I know more of your story, particularly infrastructure and operations, boom, in the same company, now you suddenly flip the switch, and it was together at one time and then divested. Where do you start as a new CISO? That seems like a very unique path. You're going to have some unique things on that. So if I'm a new CISO, or I'm targeting, I'm one of our listeners, and I'm targeting that first role, what, if I come up with that game plan, where do I start?
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think you'll find from people that have been impacted by either an attack or a breach, those are the best people to kind of go ask, hey, well, what would you do differently, right? It's those starting points. And I say right when I was beginning that transition, it gave me some really good insights when we had some difficult times. And I think going into it, think first, without a doubt, email is the initially most attacked area. Almost 80% of all attacks come through there. We already know that. And so I think making sure that you're putting many layers within that email system so that you're not dependent on your clients, whether they click or not. You as a CISO should be able to say, I don't care if not that you don't care, but if they click, I'm going to still address that. On the backside, we have our solutions in place to address anybody failing in the email system, because nobody's perfect.
Right.
You got to solve for that. Matter of fact, one of my business owners at one of my companies had stated that. It's like, I get it, you're testing me all, but you should be practicing making sure even when I screw up, that you're going to protect us. And he's absolutely correct. Right?
So it's like, I kind of feel it like it's like packaging, right? You're going to bubble wrap some things a little more than some of the other things.
That's right.
Right.
How do you get it to almost be like that zero trust? You got browser isolation. You got protecting the URL. The second area is the endpoint. You got to have a really good behavioral, tool set at your endpoint. It is your biggest attack surface. Right. So you got to address that. You got to everything externally facing. So your application stacks, everything that they can see from an attacker's perspective is something you need to address. So you got endpoint, you got email, and then your attack service from an application perspective, and then lastly, your privileged account owners. You got to get identity access management. Start with MFA everywhere.
Right.
Just start. That's a simple one. I get it. We want to get away from passwords. But at the end of the day, that's a lot better than having one area, which I've had, you constantly look, you say, hey, where did that come from? It's like, oh, well, don't they have MFA? It's like, well, we couldn't do that for whatever reason.
Right.
No, that's an entry point.
So let's go back real quick to the endpoint. Not all endpoint products are created equal, and I don't want to get into like a bake-off or anything like that from a discussion point. Anything around that they should be looking for relative to features, functionality, right?
Right.
One more than the other, right? Obviously, traditional antivirus is pretty much dead. What should we be looking for on the endpoint side?
In the endpoint side, I think analytics, behavior, something that really triggers based on the behavior of the end user, right? Understanding what's happening from the end user's perspective and being able to react and protect in that sense. I think that's the most critical component, which is your behavior analytics portion of it. But be honest, there are a lot of good solutions out there, but if you don't enable the right policies and configurations and then validate them on a regular basis,
right,
you can have the best tool out there in the market and you're still going to get breached.
Perfect.
Right? We've had a really good tool, and we ended up getting screwed up. And you go back and do the investigation, and you find out, well, yeah, we let them enable USB drives connectivity, or whatever the case may be, and it's like, wow, who did that? It's like, well, we had an exception because so and so needed to do their PowerShell or whatever, and you end up messing your own self up because you don't validate the policies that are critical to making sure that the tool works as expected.
So you talked me into a space now where I'm passionate about, which is the idea of, a lot of folks are like, more tools, I need more capabilities, but we're not using the tools to the fullest extent of their capabilities. So less tools enable more capabilities on the tools that you do have. I think that would be a very good thing that I would go to these new CISOs, walking in the door saying,
absolutely,
check out your tools, see how well they're configured, right? See how well you're using them. If your maturity is low in any given tool, in one of those core tools, figure out why.
Absolutely,
right? Yeah.
absolutely.
So that's,
and on your partners that are coming in, your QBRs. My team knows that there's 4 questions I'd always ask them.
Do it. Tell me.
Hey, what do I license for? Tell me when I've purchased your product, what am I, available to use from a license perspective? What capabilities do I have?
Yep.
Secondly, you tell me how much am I using of that.
Yeah.
Right. Don't let my team tell me, because they're going to say, oh yeah, we're using it all.
Yeah, boss, we got it.
You tell me, out of all the things you see, how much am I using? And its averages 10 to 20%.
Yeah, it does.
And I was like, what about all these? Oh, well, we couldn't do it because of this. Or we couldn't enable that because of this. and you end up using only like 10% of what you have capability to leverage, right? And then once you have that, you have a really good roadmap to be able to go and say, all right, we need to go fix this and fix that. The third thing is, all right, what am I not using from your suite that I have the capability, it's GA'd, and it's available for me? And why is that important? It's because you can have every tool in the world, and guess what? Your team can't learn every single one of them. Fewer tools, better capabilities across them, and then leverage them. They might not be the best across the board, but at least you got them to be maximized and utilized. And then the last one is, where are you headed? What are you doing tomorrow and the next day? That requires an NDA, right? But the big winner around that is, if your roadmap isn't the same as my roadmap, then I'm going to restart planning where am I going next.
Exactly.
Right, and that's a challenge, because if some teams didn't think about where their next step was at, you can then say, all right, well, I need to start moving now, because by the time we get there and replace them, they're going to be old news. And in our industry, 3 years and everything's changed.
Yep.
So.
I think that's great advice. Great line of thinking for obviously the new folks that we're targeting from this part of the conversation, but also maybe some of the more experienced as well, right? Sometimes we get so involved in what we're doing, we kind of forget the basics a little bit. So maybe on the end of the year reflection, or you're getting into your new year, because I think this is coming out early, mid 2025. Oh my gosh, that maybe that's something we need to reflect on as more experienced leaders. That go back and ask ourselves that question again.
And if you need some help, I mean, I have a yearly assessment that's done in our environment, but it doesn't just assess the framework. It also has people, process, and technology in that assessment. So when you're looking at your people, you're saying, hey, do you have the right dedicated people to this? Do you have enough coverage? Do you have enough skill sets to be able to do that? You need to know as a leader whether or not your team is ready for it, because you might be thinking that they're ready and they're not, right? And they need help. The processes will be in normal coverage, but then the technology is that assessment as well. Are you using the technology appropriately across your landscape? Or are you just in the pocket of it? And you say, yeah, I have X product, and everybody thinks, oh, you got that everywhere. That's really good. It's like, no, I really only got in this little space here, right?
That's it's like the cyber liability insurance questionnaires. Do you use MFA? Well, yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's no more to the question
That's
than
right.
that, but
and that doesn't give you the maturity.
There's a lot of nuance there.
Yeah.
Okay, so leading right into the next question, which I think is perfect. So let's talk about measuring our cybersecurity program, right? Whether it be efficacy, maturity, what should we be measuring? Now, obviously, we've talked about the kind of the bits and bytes side of things, the tactical, and then we have the strategic. So maybe we can kind of get a little bit of look on both sides from Paul Reyes on that.
Yeah, I think most people understand your NIST framework or your ISO framework, and you kind of group those into big category buckets. You got data, you got IAM, for privileged access, you got, perimeter protection. Those are all valid. You got to go do those. And you start with inventory, because you got to know what you have before you can go and protect it, right? So I'd rather go and touch on, hey, how do you then take and translate that into the metrics that you're going to approach your board and your senior execs.
Inside out.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Go ahead.
And the reasoning is because that's usually where you're going to get your funding from.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And if you're constantly one that kind of gets denied all the time, well, it's probably because you're going bottom up, trying to explain that you got all these technical issues, and the business doesn't understand what that means for their perspective of risk. So what I normally like to do is take a risk statement, ask a business unit and say, what do you care about, and what if something technology-wise, and if it went down that you could bankrupt the company, right, or cripple you severely. Right. Maybe it's a reputation, and let's just say that's asset X. If that goes down, or if that data gets taken, that's it. I mean, we're going to be in the news. We're going to be serious problems. Okay, great. Then you take that risk statement, that risk item, and there might be 7 or 8, there might be 2 or 3, there might be just 1, and take those and say what type of attack types that are out there would affect that particular risk. Is it a social engineering attack? Is it a whatever? And you come up with those attack types, and MITRE would help on identifying that. And then from those, you says, all right, well, those, let's say there's 3 attack types that would hit that one asset. Those 3 attack types, how much, from those, map those to controls. What are the controls that I have in my framework that map to those for that business unit? And now you got, say, 20 controls that map to this particular one. Then you say, all right, how am I effective on this? Right? And you can take those by saying, well, how many findings do I have? Let's say it's vulnerability is one of them that says you got 12 systems on there that need to be current, and in those you got something hadn't been patched for a year. Okay, well that's you're really crappy on that control, and so you're painting the picture of where you're good, and that way you tell the business, hey, you're high risk in this area. And they're gonna well, why'd you think that? Well, we got 13 controls, let's say, or 20 controls, and 50% of them we're not doing well on those. He goes, well, that's too high of a tolerance for me.
Right.
It's like, okay, well then you need to push down on your teams that are aligned to you to tell them this is a priority for you, so that way we can go and solve this. And matter of fact, some of these don't even need money, you just need time, right? And then now their priority changes because they don't want to see that risk on there. But if they said, no, we're good with that, I think that's that guy. We have the right priorities. Great. Here you go. And I agree that we agree. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. You agree, I'll agree. Yeah. Because as long as you're good with it, I'm good with it, right? And it's a different conversation, right? Because then you'll find out, like, for that value, it's not really worth doing that. And there's some that are a lot less value than we thought. And then others, they're really important, right? And you didn't realize that.
Yeah, and that approach is outside in and then back outside again.
Yes.
It's interesting because I talk to a lot of folks, like peers, colleagues, et cetera, and a lot of times they do start with the controls, right? Where do we stack all that good stuff, the assessments, the internal or external. But in this case, you're saying we're going to start with the business. Business defines the risk. Tell me what is key for you. And then you're tracing that back again as a translator. You're the only one that can do that, and that's your big part of your job is to be able to, and then translate that back to them as the context of the risk is what I'm hearing.
And I started that not just like, hey, I'm that smart around it. I had a CEO that asked me the question. I was showing him, here's our maturity score. Here's our maturity score, and here's our different metrics. We're doing good on this and doing good on that, but here's our maturity score that kind of maps to that. And he goes, let's say it's 3.0 is my maturity score. And he goes, what happens when you go to 4? What does that mean to me? It's like, I have no idea what that means to me, right? And I was like, well, it means that you're doing good or you're doing this. And he was like, it still doesn't translate to, tell me how is that going to affect my business? Right. And I was like, well, dang, I'm in the wrong direction. Now I have to tell him how these metrics, the technical ones, map to a business risk. And then it became really clear.
Love it. Okay, so we're going to move on from there. That was great. Okay, you got your roots in technology up to about the director level, approximately-ish. How has that influenced how you lead in cybersecurity today? It seems like there would be a decent line between how you're interacting with technical teams, right?
Yeah.
And I call this out because I see myself in this question as well. So wanted to get your take on that.
When I started running infrastructure and I started to get under my belt, even when I went to the vice president role, started getting groups under me that I've never done before, right? A lot of times people say, I've done this and I've done that, I've done like network, I've done desktop. Then I got SAP basis, then I got, application X, and then I got DBAs, and I've never done those, right? I was like, well, the question is how do you lead, right? In the military, there's the question that came to me one time when I was to run another organization, and I said, well, I've never done that, and he goes, I think you're a sergeant. You are a leader. You've gone through NCO training, right? I said, yes, sir. He goes, well, then you should be able to do it. Are you saying you can't? And I was like, that's not what I'm saying. I'll do it. And then boom, you jump in it because you have to, work with your team and know that your teams that are the experts at it, right? And so you got to lead them. You don't got to do it for them. And that aspect is what changed when I went into the cyber side because I was kind of worried. Now, don't get me wrong. I still went and got certified or other things just because I wanted to make sure I talked the right language. But my direct reports, including right now, can do circles around red teaming and all kind of things against me. But be able to, that's not what I bring to the plate, right? As you move up and you translate into there, you have to translate risk, strategy, direction, and you have to enable people to feel like they're making a difference, right? And that's your specialty. And if you're doing anything other than that and keeping current, then you're missing the boat. You're hurting your team.
Right. Yeah, because then at that point you're a team member versus being the leader. Totally agree. One of the challenges or one of the things over time, I think that we as an industry, as cybersecurity, I always tell folks on the show, I feel like we're as a role, like a CISO right now, we're kind of in that awkward tween stage, young adolescent, where we're figuring out what we want to be when we grow up a little bit. And we kind of go back to what the childhood was. And the childhood was the tech. It was on the keyboard. It was doing the thing. That's where we're comfortable. And I think we're growing up out of that. And I think maybe we're beyond that. Maybe we're all getting ready to get our driver's license or something like that. But in the end, I agree. I think it's us having to break some of those old ties to say, I don't necessarily have to have been on that keyboard.
That's right.
To be able to lead a group that does that.
Right.
And I think we're getting better, but I think there is still, I see the debates happen where we have, should you be technical as a CISO conversations? And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, similar to, professional CISO. But I look forward to the day when we don't have to have that conversation.
Right.
You should understand enough at the level that you're at the organization that you're at, and obviously aspiring for more, most likely. So I'll jump off my soapbox on that. You spent a decade and a half in critical infrastructure directly. Now, without speaking directly, about the company itself, obviously sitting in there, you get to talk to other organizations that also are in critical infrastructure. I'm sure the threat intelligence and things like that. So, kind of, where were we at? What does the arc look like? Where are we headed? What should people be thinking about in the critical infrastructure space? For cybersecurity, of course.
So I think even when I started, it also was kicking off heavy with critical infrastructure, not just power, but also in the water and in any of those critical functions. The cybersecurity became really present. Nation-state conversations started happening really heavy. And so those threats only got worse even up till today. I remember when the Ukraine-Russia thing kicked off, there was, constant all hands on deck. There was, as CISA stated, shields up. And there was all conversation around what are you doing to ensure that you're separating your critical infrastructure from your corporate side of the house, and how are you ensuring that you're putting layers, enclaves and other, piece to that. Just to hit on that one, to separate you from the rest of the community, right? And so that's not changing. I think the last time I talked to an FBI agent, there's this constant conversations around the same big nation state groups, but it's now getting a little bit more dicey because of the Gen AI capabilities now, right? So now you got a whole lot of other capabilities that are now skyrocketed in capabilities of how to attack. That it's now just a bigger conversation. And I don't know if we all have the right answers, but I will tell you that most critical infrastructure groups separate, keep all those critical components with separate teams managing them. It's a lot of hassle, but at the end of the day, that more separation protects you from the many other things that can go on through a network. So then your only things that you're really, really worried about is your third-party risks, those partners that have keys to the kingdom when they come in, and your transient assets, the assets that come into the building that really bypass a lot of the other configurations. Those are a heavy focus between third-party software bombs and the transient assets. And so your focus shifts to make sure you hit the worst possible things at the moment.
Gotcha. Are we fighting Mission Impossible here? Is there hope? Is it, because I know outside looking in, because I haven't sat in critical infrastructure in a long time, is it a case of, I feel like the work that CISA has been doing has been better than what we used to have. And obviously with Congress really not doing anything that we can count on, as much as they can, it seems. Is that characterization correct? Because again, I was outside looking in. Is that close?
Yeah, I would, this is my personal opinion. I would think that we're keeping close and keeping up, but if somebody really wanted to do something, they'd be able to do it. Right? There's just so many challenges with legacy infrastructure that you have out there that they could. But I would think that would be an act of war, right? And so
Right.
to be a different ball of wax. And I think that's
Correct.
really the deterrent
Right.
that the United States has, is that if you go to that level, then there's some
It could go
explaining
kinetic.
to do.
Could
you
go
know?
kinetic at that point. Yeah.
So, but I think we're getting better around it. I
it.
think the the ISACs that are communicating around there, there's various different communities, software that are critical infrastructure related, that we've leveraged, that kind of sees what everybody, all in the critical infrastructure is doing. A lot more visibility to it. So I think we're getting a lot better at it.
So here, keep the grind. Keep grinding.
Yeah, keep grinding.
Okay. All right. So final topic before we hit 10 questions with Paul Reyes. You're an Air Force veteran. We talked about it a little bit. Can you speak about your time in service, number one? And then I always love to have my veterans that come and sit in the seat with me talk about what today's service members, transitioning or veterans, what they can take specifically from your lessons learned, where you sit, your path that you took, and if they're looking to pursue a cybersecurity career. So talk to me about your time, and then give me your advice.
I would say I'm definitely going to give you my advice. I would say that it's definitely different than everybody else, and the reason why I say that is because my youngest son was 4 years in the Air Force, and his experience is completely, totally different than mine.
Of course.
And so when he came out, I was like, "Hey, what did you have this?" But there were some common items. Some of the common items is the people I've encountered throughout my career there. I can depend on them forever, right? It's just like that's a different camaraderie that you have in the military. That it's more competitive and combative on the outside, right? You don't throw people under the bus, and you're always hand in hand, right?
Right.
That has been common throughout both of our careers. I think when you look at your career, don't look at it just a point in time. It is a different than it is in the commercial area, and they offer a lot of different training, education, leadership, that you can then take that and then use it anywhere. And I don't care what job you're in.
Agreed.
The military does a really good job on understanding and giving you a sense that it's not all bad. You get to reason. There's been many a times, and I hire quite a bit of military folks when I'm in there, is because when the crap hits the fan, people are just like calm themselves. Like, it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
We've done this before, right?
Exactly.
And so that's hard to find, in regular. You
Agreed.
got now people, oh my, and just like, oh wow, it's just like, come on, yes, I had to call you after hours. I get it, you're putting your kids, but we're like critical. So different sense, and I think everybody going through that should know that the military does provide a lot of that good leadership qualities for us to translate into the business world. The other one is there's a lot of people out there in our society, right? In our group. So reach out to them.
Yeah.
Get them the help. I know I hire quite a bit,
Yep.
And I know other people that they like that quality of a resource that's been through their service and willing to invest in them.
So I have my oldest son, veteran as well, Marine Corps veteran. Trained him myself. Now he works in cyber. So thrilled there. And then actually just had my youngest commission as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps just last week. So,
Nice.
And I told them both the same thing, which is 100% translatable. The military will try to make you doubt. That they're like, oh man, it's rough out there.
Yeah.
Like but those things that they trained you in and made you great inside is actually even more so on the outside. Now you've got to temper it a little bit. Don't get me wrong.
That's right.
You got to learn how to work with civilians. But in the end, once that happens, then again, it's those pillars. So totally agree with you there.
And I will say the command and control was a hard thing to shift off, right?
Oh, it is.
Yeah. So you get it's like, all right, well, let's say, and boom, you just like command and control. And
I don't know how many times I've had that conversation at me, Mr. Malicoat. You need to,
Yeah.
And I to this day, it's been 20 odd years, and people are like, all right, that was a little harsh.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know, okay. All right, so let's do 10 questions with Paul Reyes. What's your favorite word?
Awesome.
What's your least favorite word?
I can't.
What area of your work do you find most interesting?
People. It's always changing. So just managing people and growing them is the most interesting.
What area of your work is the most challenging for you?
Probably convincing teams to head in a direction that they've never done before.
Understood. What sound or noise do you love?
Say it again?
What sound or noise do you love?
That is a real one. Bacon sizzling.
Yeah, I'm down on that one. What sound or noise do you hate?
A backfiring of a vehicle. I cringe every time I hear that.
What's your favorite curse word?
Crap. My grandkid says it's a bad word, but I don't think
It's
so.
okay.
But I love it.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Day trading.
What profession would you not like to do?
Mowing the lawn. I did that.
Understood. Final question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear your God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Well, it does exist, and I would be hoping he says, "Great job, good and faithful servant."
Love it. Love it. Paul Reyes, thank you for coming on today. Totally appreciate it. The wisdom that you passed today, I think, has been great. I like the outside in, back outside when we talk about what's most important for your business. I think we kind of lose that a little bit. I think we get so focused on our controls.
Yeah.
We get so kind of, it's harder to do, but I think from, when you master it, now you're in the business, right? And now you're a good partner, back to what we spoke about. So, again, thanks a lot. Hope you have a wonderful, although this is recorded before Christmas, have a great Christmas and New Year, and look forward to seeing you in the new year,
It was
brother.
great. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, man. All right, gang. In the end, I renewed the call. We must professionalize the role of the CISO. In the meantime, I wish you health, happiness, and success in your journey in becoming the professional CISO. Let's do this.
We're professionalizing the CISO role, so please subscribe to the Professional CISO podcast.